This meeting of the Honorable Senate for Friday, January the 30th, 2026 is called to order. Before we begin the business of the day, I ask the Senate to recognize the passing of Mr. Christopher Bovell, CD, former senator, an attorney, and businessman. It is, of course, with a heavy heart that we recognize the passing of Senator Christopher Bovell, who died recently. Mr. Bovell was a man of principle and integrity who served the country with quiet pride and distinction. He represented the people of Jamaica in the Senate from 1983 to 89, and for more than 40 years he served as an served on the executive of the Bustamante Industrial Trade Union. He is widely respected within the business and legal fraternities for his wisdom, sound judgment, and steady leadership. His invaluable contribution to the nation earned him the Order of Distinction in the rank of Commander Class in 1994. We have lost a patriot, trusted advisor, and friend, and will be deeply missed. We extend our heartfelt condolences to his family and loved one, especially his beloved wife, Michelle. Let us keep them in our prayers. It would be remiss of me not to say on a personal level that I knew Christopher Bovell. I met him, I think, in 1979, and remained friends of himself and his family until his passing. For those of you who do not recognize the significance of the time that he served in the Senate from 83 to 89, it was during that period of time when the People's National Party was not represented in the Senate, but the Prime Minister of the day had appointed what they refer to as an independent Senate, and Bovell served during that time so that he would have been a critical link in the continuation of the democracy from 83 to 89. So he's to be recognized for that. No. I'm sorry. He was a Jamaica Labour Party appointed senator, government senator from 83 to 89, but still within the context of that Senate that was somewhat problematic. I think that the president of the Bustamante Industrial Trade Union wanted to say something.
Thank you, President. Colleagues, I rise today to pay tribute to the life and service of a distinguished Jamaican, a former member of this Honorable Senate in the 1980s, where he served between 1983 and 1989, an esteemed, celebrated attorney at law, and a devoted member of the Managing Executive Committee of the Bustamante Industrial Trade Union, Mr. Christopher Bovell. This Senate, sir, and the BITU records with profound sadness his passing. And I take this opportunity on behalf of the BITU's MEC, our staff, the delegates and members of the wider labor movement to acknowledge his extraordinary contribution to public life and to the cause in his own way to the working people in Jamaica. You know, Mr. Bovell served the BITU with unwavering dedication for more than 40 years, as its attorney at law and trustee. President, although formally retired from active legal service in 2014, he never truly stepped away. He continued to give generously of his time, wisdom, steady counsel as trustee, remaining deeply engaging in safeguarding the union's governance, our stability, our institutional integrity, up until his passing. He was, in a sense, a gentle giant. He possessed a calm demeanor, measured voice, and a meticulous mind. In moments of complexity or tension, Chris Bovell was often the steady hand at the table, thoughtful, principled, and very deliberate. His presence alone inspired confidence. You know, President, generations of trade union leaders and staff members relied on his guidance, knowing it would always be grounded in fairness, sound judgment, and abiding respect for the rule of law. That was the kind of person he was. His sense of probity was unquestionable. His counsel was never driven by expedience, but always, Mr. President, by principle. Yet beyond his formidable legal mind was a deeply human warmth. Many of us will always remember, you know, when someone shared good news with him, he would ask me, President, how was that situation with the workers? And I said, it went very well, you know. And, you know, we had a breakthrough. And his response to us was, that's fantastic. That is wonderful. And that was always the kind of response you'd get from him. And it was never superficial, Mr. President. It was always welcoming in terms of his response. And that simple habit captured the essence of the man. His graciousness, his generous spirit, and a quietful, joyful approach in serving others. And throughout the decades with the BITU, he was a vigilant guardian of the union's affairs, ensuring that it was administered with integrity, transparency, and the highest level of accountability. At the same time, he cared deeply about the welfare of the staff of the BITU. We could always depend on him for his own kind of internal, steadfast advocacy. And he would say, if the BITU was to represent workers, the workers in the BITU ought to be represented. And he gave that voice, and we commended him for it. And so, you know, he was a trusted advisor. During moments of challenges, he was a firm believer in the trade union movement. Mr. President, the BITU has not only lost an outstanding attorney at law and trustee, but a trusted friend, a guardian of its values, and Jamaica has lost a son who served both the parliament, businesses, and the labor movement with honor and distinction. You know, I consider it a kind of unique individual who balanced his practice, balanced his party, balanced the private sector, and balanced the trade union movement without a flinch. That was the kind of uniqueness demonstrated by a Chris Bovell. I believe Mr. Shearer brought him into the union. And so on behalf of the leadership, the staff and the membership of the Bustamante Industrial Trade Union, us in the Senate, I extend sincere condolences to his family, his friends, the Jamaica Labour Party, who he served with exception, also as its trustee, and his professional colleagues. We give thanks for the life of service well lived and for a legacy, sir, that will continue to guide us for generations. Mr. Christopher Bovell will be deeply missed, fondly remembered, and forever honored for his exceptional contribution to the advancement of workers' rights and to the public life of our nation. May his soul rest in peace.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Gale. Senator Scott Motley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Listening to the tribute which has been paid to Christopher Bovell by my distinguished colleague, Senator Calvin Gale, I can say that his entire approach to life has been captured. Christopher Bovell served the legal profession with distinction for over 64 years and rose to the very top of the profession as the partner at Dunn Cox and Orrit. He never stopped practicing because even when he retired as partner, he continued to be a consultant to that law firm. His public service spans all those years as well. And in many ways, not just as in the capacity which you have outlined, Senator Gale, but in other areas, he was an inspirational figure. I remember the last time I saw him was on an occasion which he really never missed, which was the Jamaica Bar Association dinner. And in the same way that he demonstrated partnership throughout his entire life, he also, of course, was there with this charming and just fabulous wife. She was always at those events and occasions right by his side. So he demonstrates how one should be in public life in so many different areas. I acknowledge the service that he has given. He has left behind an inspiring legacy in the legal profession, in the Jamaica Labour Party, and in other areas. I extend the condolences of the opposition to his family, and may his soul rest in eternal peace.
Thank you very much, members. As is customary when we recognize the passing of a colleague, I ask you to rise and stand in 1 moment silence. May his soul rest in peace and light perpetual shine upon him. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask the clerk to ensure that Mrs. Michelle Bovell is written to appropriately and a copy of the transcript sent to her, and ask that she convey the condolences of the Senate to the other members of our family. It would be remiss of me, of course, at this time not to mention the passing of 2 giants of our culture in the form personages of Stephen Catcore and Sly Dunbar. It's a difficult time for the community, of course, and Bob Clark. It's a difficult time for the for the culture, difficult time for persons involved in the culture, and particularly difficult to our Minister, Babsy Grange, who was extremely close to all of the three, but particularly to Sly, who she had a remarkable relationship with over the years. So our condolence will go to them. Thank you very much.
I was trying to discreetly inquire of the leader, but may I proceed? May I be allowed, permitted to say something to you, Mr. President? I noted that you depart the ECJ on January 31st, which is tomorrow? And I wanted to take the opportunity to acknowledge the service which the President has given in this capacity. We should never take this sort of generous, unreserved service for granted. And you have been a member of the ECJ during its evolution. In fact, you know, Mr. President, I tried to capture, you know, I always run into trouble when I try to write things down. But I would say that with you there, the ECJ evolved into a mature and independent body. The period saw the strengthening of the permanent voters list, the deepening use of technology in voter registration and election administration, and the professionalization of electoral operations across constituencies. These advances were accompanied by increased transparency, clearer rules governing campaign conduct, and improved mechanism for dispute resolution. Your contribution to this evolution was marked by your insistence on due process, your careful deliberation, and your respect for institutional boundaries. And I will say to those in this space who are young, I wish I could put myself in that category, that it is important to recall what elections were like. Jamaica was notorious, I think, for having violent elections marked by bogus voting and just a general indiscipline and disorder. I was a candidate in the 1989 elections, so I speak with clear authority. But sometimes it is necessary to remind persons because they don't know where we are coming from and how we have evolved. Jamaica is now a model. Our ECJ has been regarded as being a body that ought to be replicated. And you, Mr. President, you have contributed to this development. And I could not let this occasion pass without, as a member of the opposition, thanking you for your service. You know, you mentioned Sly Dunbar and Catcore. And I must tell you that when I saw that you were demitting office, I said to myself, in much the same way you did in reference to them, this is the passing of an era where your greats, thankfully, the president is leaving in this manner, but your greats are taking their leave of the stage. Well, I will say the president can never take full leave of any stage because his personality is larger than life and his indomitable spirit will always find a way to continue to do what he does best, to serve Jamaica. Mr. President, I acknowledge you as a friend and as the President of the Senate, but more so for the things that you have done for our nation, if it pleases you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I want to thank the Leader of Opposition Business in the Senate for doing that, and I think it is quite instructive that she wanted to do that, and I think it says a lot about you, Mr. President, that the opposition team wanted to rise and acknowledge the fact that you were leaving such an important institution as the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. Mr. President, you have served for 20 years. That is a very long time. The Electoral Commission of Jamaica is seen globally as an example of what good democratic institutions look like, and you have played an amazing part in that. You have presided over 5 general elections, many local government elections. You've also had by-elections that you were there as a member. Mr. President, that role that you've played has been a very big one. I recall I've had the chance to talk to 2 chairs of the Electoral Commission, and they've all said that you were very important to moving things forward. And even though you were there representing the Jamaica Labour Party, you knew and you have said that your goal was to represent democracy for Jamaica. And so you are a great example to all of us, including the younger ones here, of what public service looks like. You were always committed to your party, but you were also committed to democracy. And so some things are bigger than just, partisan positioning. And so I want to acknowledge you, Mr. President. I want to acknowledge the work that you have done. I want to acknowledge the part you have played in Jamaica being a standard bearer. When we think of Jamaica, we think of the music, and we spoke about the music this morning, but Jamaica is also hailed for its electoral process. And Mr. President, you've played an indelible part in that. And so this morning, on behalf of our colleagues, we want to congratulate you on that time, to say that we are obviously disappointed you're not there, but we know that the legacy that you have laid there will continue going forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank colleagues for the recognition of my service. I ask the clerk to make the appropriate note and send the transcript. Send the transcript to me. Just very briefly, no one individual would be bold enough to take credit for what has happened at the Electoral Commission of Jamaica and the Electoral Advisory Committee. And I don't even think that Messrs. Manley or Seaga, with whom the process started, would be bold enough to take credit for it. The need for us to reform our electoral system and to ensure the foundation of the democracy are properly laid and nurtured was a recognition that if we did not do that, the country would have no future. It is no coincidence that as the economy of the country improves, or vice versa, as the democratic processes improve and grow stronger, then the economic foundation of the country can also improve, because one cannot prosper without the other. So we recognize Messrs. Manley and Seaga for that early recognition that led them to establish the Electoral Advisory Committee, which essentially, for those members who are unaware, removed the conduct of elections from, I think it was the Ministry of Home Affairs. Mr. Manley appointed Mr. P.J. Pattison as his point man in this regard, and Mr. Seaga appointed Bruce Golding. So the foundations were laid on the inspiration of Manley and Seaga, and the groundwork by Pattison and Golding, and the nation owes them a debt of gratitude. Beyond that, the staff of the Electoral Office of Jamaica, which is the administrative arm of the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, have done a remarkable job over the years. And we have managed to identify many excellent directors of elections. Present Director of Election, Mr. Glasspool Brown, and we recognize him and all his staff. As far as the Electoral Commission is concerned, I've had the privilege to sit with Professor Miller, someone who really was a forceful personality and who drove, and I use that word with consideration, he drove the process of establishing the foundation of the democracy beyond just the Electoral Advisory Committee and pushed it into the Electoral Commission of Jamaica, a gentleman who was, as I said, very forceful in his views and very forceful in his manner, and it was what was needed at the time. Thereafter, we had we had the Honorable Dorothy Pine McClarty, who the Senate recognized recently, and presently Earl Jarrett. Both McClarty and Jarrett were consensus builders. Never really intended to say much, but over the years I've had the privilege of sitting with some very turbulent characters on the Electoral Commission, not least of which was Danny Buchanan, who eventually became my very good friend, and Dr. D.K. Duncan, who I became very good friends with. And I must tell you that one of the greatest regrets that I had was that Duncan never wrote. And I kept saying to him, you know, brethren, you need to sit down and write. I want to hear so many things about your history. And I said to his wife on one occasion, Duncan, DK said, I'm to come and sit with him, and he's going to write. She said, you're about the 50th person him tell that. But like everything else, we lost treasures in these people. So I really had, you know, I said turbulent people. Paul Burke was also there. And presently, the situation at the commission is that Dr. Andre Franklin, who is someone who sits with me there and who has a very deep understanding of the democracy and the Jamaican psyche. So it has been a privilege to serve with these people. It has been a privilege to represent the Prime Minister, Andrew Holness. And in closing, I will just say this. When I went to the commission, and I've said this elsewhere, when I was reappointed by Holness, his instruction was to me was always the commission and the democracy first. If there is a conflict with the party, it goes to the democracy and the commission. If you have a problem with the party, come to me about it. I've never had occasion to do so. I was given a free will there, and I'm grateful to him for that. As I said, it has been a privilege to serve, and I thank you very much to my colleagues here for recognizing my service, and for many in the wider Jamaica who have also recognized that service. Thank you very much. And yes, Lambert, she did catch me off guard. Oh, I see what you mean. We'll see. I will tell you, though, what is good. I was going to say this is not for the record, but that's ridiculous. I just want to point out, for those of you who have inquired, I'm leaving not because of the intervention of the vagaries of nature or health, or the intervention of the politics. I'm leaving because I have decided to leave, and I have decided to leave at this time. Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate are the following. Annual report of SCJ Holdings Limited for the financial year 2019-2020 and its related ministry paper number 2 of 2026 titled Annual Report of SCJ Holdings Limited for the financial year 2019-2020. Annual report and audited financial statements of the Jamaica Bauxite Mining Limited for the financial year 2020-2021 and its related ministry paper number 3 of 2026 titled Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Jamaica Bauxite Mining Limited for the financial year 2020-2021, Annual Report of Land Divestment for the financial year 2022-2023, Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Coconut Industry Board for the year ended December 31, 2022, and its related ministry paper numbered 4 of 2026 titled Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Coconut Industry Board for the year ended December 31, 2022, Economic and Fiscal Assessment Report of the Independent Fiscal Commission for the financial year 2025-2026, Combined Annual Report of the Office of the National Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons for the period 2020 to 2025.
Thank you very much. A bill is brought from the Honorable House of Representatives. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next sitting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. Whereas we acknowledge the fundamental responsibility of the government of Jamaica in maintaining social order, protecting individual rights, and providing national security, and whereas we note the invaluable role Jamaica's security forces, the Jamaica Constabulary Force, JCF, and the Jamaica Defense Force, JDF, play in preserving our territorial integrity, maintaining law and order, and fostering a safer, more peaceful society. And whereas Jamaica's historical and persistent crime problem, particularly our epidemic of violence, one toward the other, have rendered the work of the JCF and the JDF particularly difficult and hazardous. And whereas members of our security forces have to undertake their very difficult job with resource constraints, oftentimes making considerable personal sacrifice. And whereas the JCF in particular has been undergoing considerable institutional reform and transformation, certainly over the past decade, and whereas the transformation that has been taking place in terms of capacity building, training, investigative capabilities, technology integration, accountability, and respect for human rights, and whereas said transformation has caused the security forces to be elevated in the estimation of right-thinking members of Jamaican society, so much so that they now enjoy considerable public approval and positive sentiment compared to a past dispensation. And whereas the Jamaican people have been reaping the dividends of the considerable policy, financial, and legislative investments that have been made and continue to be made by the government in terms of a vastly improved national security architecture with the resultant enhancement in citizen safety and security. And whereas we acknowledge the incontrovertible positive results the security forces, in partnership with the citizenry of Jamaica, have brought about as manifest in the 8% reduction in murders in 2023, the 19% reduction in murders in 2024, and the massive 43% reduction in murders in 2025. And whereas it is of critical importance that the people of Jamaica affirm our security forces, pay homage to their tremendous personal and collective sacrifice, and boost their morale by tangibly celebrating them. Be it resolved, Mr. President, that Jamaica fosters a culture of respect and solidarity by declaring and observing the Wednesday preceding Father's Day in June of each year as Security Forces Day, not dissimilar to Teachers' Day, which is observed in May of each year on the Wednesday preceding Mother's Day. This as a fitting and long overdue way of demonstrably affirming, honoring, and celebrating the hardworking men and women serving in our security forces.
Thank you very much, Senator Morgan. The other item noted there will be revisited at a later point in time. Questions and answers to questions. Motions that may be made of the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public Business Minister, who has permission to sit on a seat. You had asked me before? No, what Mr. Sinclair is saying, you're asking, you still have to ask me, he's just...
No, I was saying I had forgotten to ask, but I do need... I know internally, we just never asked and said it publicly. Thank you, my dear. Okay. Mr. President, the bill before the Senate today is entitled An Act to Amend the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders, which was tabled in the House of the Representatives, and we had also, it was tabled and passed in the House of Representatives, and also it was tabled in December 2025 here in the Senate. Mr. President, I'd also like to note that the official leader of government business in the Senate had indicated that she would take charge of this bill, but I will now take charge of it today. So the bill outlines the two-stage statutory regime for the expungement of criminal records in Jamaica. The first stage allows for a person who was convicted of an offense to be treated as a rehabilitated person, subject to the passing of the prescribed rehabilitation period, and for the conviction to be automatically treated as spent. The second stage permits the rehabilitated person to apply to the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Board to have the spent conviction expunged from his or her criminal record. However, for the board to grant the expungement, the board must be satisfied that the applicant has been in fact rehabilitated and that there will be no prejudice to the interests of justice or national security by granting the expungement. Mr. President, the expungement of one's criminal record affords the rehabilitated person who has paid their debt to society a second chance so as to pursue certain opportunities, such as employment opportunities and even residing overseas. The second chance concept is, in theory, the main objective of this legislation. However, it has not been fully operationalized. Many applicants who have indeed paid their debt to society, who have benefited from reform, rehabilitation, and training, have still been denied the expungement of their criminal records. And I know many of us know individuals like that. These unsuccessful applicants have indicated that as a result, their standard of living has been negatively affected, which is an emotional and financial impediment. Mr. President, on May 13, 2025, the Honorable Delroy Chuck, Minister of Justice, introduced the bill in the House of Representatives and demonstrated the government's intention to uphold the concept of the second chance. Minister Chuck, in his introduction of this bill in the other place, previously highlighted 6 issues that were arising from the previous act. So the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Board, currently the board, cannot consider applications where the sentence imposed is for a term of imprisonment that exceeds 5 years. There have been instances where persons have been convicted of offenses which are not particularly egregious, however, still carry sentences that exceed 5 years, and these include motor vehicle manslaughter, offenses under the Malicious Injuries to Property Act, and offenses under the Larceny Act. This limitation on the board's discretion is believed to have partially resulted in an exponential increase in the number of refused applications. The proposed expansion of the board's discretion to consider offenses that carry sentences which exceed 5 years but are no more than 10 years ought to result in an increase in the corresponding rehabilitation period. And as such, the rehabilitation period ought to increase from 10 to 12 years for persons who are above the age of 18 years. Likewise, for persons who are below the age of 18 years, the rehabilitation period ought to increase from 5 to 8 years. The third point I wanted to note was that the board is currently not guided by a list of factors to consider in its assessment of applications for expungement. It is our view that a list of factors will assist the board in determining the worthiness of an applicant, free from extemporaneous factors. And the list of factors include, but it's not limited to, the nature and gravity of the offense. All of these make perfect sense. The findings of a social inquiry report, a psychological evaluation of the offender, whether the offender has successfully completed a rehabilitation or resocialization program, whether the offender has accepted responsibility or demonstrated remorse for his crime, his or her crime, whether the offender has participated in restorative justice sessions, whether the offender has offered and or paid restitution to the victim. It also includes the age of offender at the time he or she committed the crime for which he or she was convicted, whether the offense is one for which there are international obligations that limit or bar its expungement, whether expungement of the offense would affect or have any implications on any other law, and whether the offender has committed another offense since the conviction for which he is seeking expungement for a minimum of 20 years or such other period not being less than 10 years, as may be determined by the board. The proposed increase in the remit of the board will result in an increase in the number of applications, and we can see that being very clear. Therefore, it would be necessary to expand its membership so as to adequately tackle the number of applications placed before it. Currently, the board consists of 5 members who meet at least once per month, or as often as is necessary. However, there is a need to increase that membership, and we've proposed no less than 7 members and no more than 9 members. The Ministry of Justice, in their outlaying of the need for these amendments, had also noted that where an individual has been convicted of only one offense, and in the eyes of the court, the seriousness and circumstances of the offense do not warrant a term of imprisonment, but rather a non-custodial sentence, and this non-custodial sentence was completed before January 1, 2000, an automatic expungement of this offense from the criminal record should be granted. In spite of the second chance where such a situation obtains, this automatic benefit should be provided to the individual so that they do not have to be subject to the application process. This allows for a refocusing of the resources on the matters that demand it. Pursuant to Section 4 of the Act, the record of the conviction of a Jamaican national in a foreign jurisdiction may be forwarded to Jamaica and is recorded in the criminal records. So we do have that happening. With some jurisdictions, we do get notified of the fact that there is a conviction for a Jamaican national, and it is recorded in our criminal records. This offense, once recorded in Jamaica, remains on the record of this individual. even after it is expunged from the criminal record in the jurisdiction where the offense was committed. Where the conviction is for an offense listed in the 3rd schedule, the discretion of the board is restricted as it cannot consider an application for expungement, notwithstanding that the law of the foreign jurisdiction permits the expungement of the offense. This restriction presents undue hardship for many returning Jamaicans. And it is for this reason we submit that the board ought to be empowered to review applications for the expungement of these offenses on a case-by-case basis. It is with all of this in mind, Mr. President, that I commit this bill, which seeks to amend the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Act, to this Honourable House for approval. And I'll now go through the clauses of the bill, Mr. President. Clause 1 of the bill makes it abundantly clear that the bill shall be read and construed as one with the Principal Act. Clause 2 of the bill proposes to amend Section 3 of the Principal Act to empower the board to consider the expungement of offences for which the sentence imposed is greater than 5 years but does not exceed 10 years. Clause 3 of the bill proposes to amend Section 4 of the Principal Act to empower the board to consider applications for the expungement of offences in circumstances where the offence was committed and subsequently expunged in a foreign jurisdiction, regardless of whether the offence is one that is listed in the 3rd schedule. Clause 4 of the bill proposes to amend Section 5 of the Principal Act so that the rehabilitation period for offences for which the sentence imposed is greater than 5 years but less than 10 years is now 15 years. Clause 5 of the bill proposes to amend Section 5A of the Principal Act so as to introduce a rehabilitation period of 8 years that is applicable to an offence for which a sentence was imposed that was greater than 5 years but no more than 10 years, where the person who committed the offence was under the age of 18 years at the time of the commission of the offence. Clause 6 of the bill proposes to amend Section 10 of the Principal Act so as to clarify the wording of the provision. Clause 7 of the bill proposes to amend Section 20A(3) of the Principal Act so as to achieve clarity in how the section is read. Clause 8 of the bill proposes to amend Section 23 of the Principal Act to outline the considerations for the board to take into account when reviewing an application for expungement. Clause 9 of the bill proposes to amend Section 28A so as to allow for the automatic expungement of expungible offences for which non-custodial sentences were handed down and completed prior to January 1, 2005, and where the individual has been convicted of only one offence and has not reoffended thereafter. Just following along. Clause 10 of the bill proposes to amend Section 32 of the Principal Act by replacing the references made to resident magistrate with the judge of a parish court. Clause 11 of the bill proposes to amend paragraph 1 of the 2nd schedule of the Principal Act so as to expand the complement of the board, which is to be no less than 7 members and to be no more than 9 members. It is also proposed that this paragraph be amended to include that the board, in addition to the Commissioner of Corrections or his nominee and the Commissioner of Police or his nominee, shall also include 1 additional member recommended by the Commissioner of Corrections and 1 additional member recommended by the Commissioner of Police. And the final clause, Mr. President, Clause 12 of the bill, proposes to amend the 3rd schedule of the Principal Act by removing the offence under Section 3 of the Malicious Injuries to Property Act removing the offenses under sections 37 and 42A of the Larceny Act, and including any offense under sections 39 or 40 of the Larceny Act if the offense involves an offense that is listed in the third schedule, making the offense under section 7A of the Dangerous Drugs Act expungible if the quantity of the ganja concerned does not exceed 1 kilogram, and making the offense under section 21B of the Dangerous Drugs Act expungible if the drug concerned is ganja in a quantity that does not exceed 1 kilogram. And I think a lot of Jamaicans will be very happy to see that. As I close, yes, as I close, Mr. President, as a part, you'd have to go through the process. Yes. As I close, I would like to echo the words of Martin Luther King. We must develop and maintain the capacity to forgive. He who is devoid of the power to forgive is devoid of the power to love. And last week, we celebrated, around the world, many people celebrated Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And it was only fitting that we exemplified the words of a legend in advancing this legislation. Jamaica is becoming, Mr. President, more peaceful every day. And our communities are becoming safer. Mr. President, minor crimes, we have that down. Major crimes are down. Murders are way down. Last year, fewer than 700 people lost their lives. And it's such a big deal. And every time I can, I talk about it. Because I remember when we were over 1,600 murders and the headlines that were there. And for us as a people to bring it down to that level, it's still not where we want it to be. Over 600 people losing their lives to murder is still too high. But we have to acknowledge that we've come a long way. Mr. President, our coming days of peace are to be welcomed and our momentum celebrated by all, because this is a win for all Jamaicans. Our men and women in the security forces are doing a phenomenal job, and I welcome what you did earlier, Senator Morgan. Our laws are being enforced and the judicial system is working. There is also a lot of work being done to prevent and dissuade those who may be led down a life of crime. There is also no work to be done to help those who made a bad choice and now wish to take the straight and narrow path. Recidivism is rarely driven by a single bad choice after release. In fact, it is usually the predictable result of unmet criminogenic needs and re-entry barriers that stack up fast. Unstable housing, weak job prospects, low skills, untreated substance abuse and mental health conditions. It also includes disrupted family and pro-social networks that can turn minor non-compliance into re-incarceration. The scale of the challenge is well documented in many countries. And we could look at the US data, and they show that from their Bureau of Justice Statistics, 9-year follow-up of people released from state prisons in 2005 found that a large majority were arrested again within the follow-up period. Our plan Secure Jamaica, the most effective national security strategy in the history of Jamaica, addresses recidivism. It addresses it. So other countries are measuring it, we're measuring it, but we're also addressing it. And we've addressed it by building rehabilitation and reintegration into the national security architecture. So, Mr. President, when we come with this bill here, it's not in isolation. It is a part of real deliberate strategies of the administration. It is important to note on the official record that we do not treat incarceration as the end of our security intervention. the Ministry of National Security explicitly includes a rehabilitation and redemption pillar aimed at improving community reintegration for offenders and access to support services for deportees. These are delivered through agencies like the Department of Correctional Services and citizen security programs. Within the Department of Correctional Services, rehabilitation starts at intake with risk and needs assessment and individualized case management, followed by structured programming, academic and vocational training, psychological support, life skills, designed explicitly to reduce recidivism and strengthen employability and reintegration outcomes. In parallel, Jamaica's restorative justice infrastructure supports diversion and conflict resolution at the community level. Mr. President, I'm very happy to note that the Ministry of National Security and Peace, the Heart NSTA Trust, and the Department of Correctional Services are working with first-time offenders to train them in income-earning skills. Their lives do not end at the prison walls. Between 2020 and 2023, 467 incarcerated individuals received certification in a skill of choice, Mr. President. And there are many skills that were done. There was masonry, and we know we need a lot of those. Carpentry, tiling, we even did hair braiding and other associated skills. So those are some of the areas we've looked at, Mr. President. So when we're talking about expungement, we have to look at it within that broader context of what we are doing. And so in our prisons, we have so many more programs now, and there needs to be more. Has to be more. I'm always very much admitting where we are. So there's some nice things in train, and they have to be expanded. But the good thing is that this work is going on, and I commit with my time with Heart NSTA Trust, we will do more work in our prisons because we want them to understand that there are people who actually want them to do well in life. And so, Mr. President, those are some of the areas in terms of skills training. And I should note, Mr. President, that 2 individuals were even certified in business administration management at level 4. That's a degree, Mr. President, inside of our prison. And we want to see more of that, and we're going to work to have more of that. And so that individual, when they are released, they need a second chance. And that's what we're saying. We're working with them. We're working with them. And then when they leave and they continue on the straight and narrow and they have a skill, it's a different person completely. And then we have a responsibility when they've stayed on that journey to help them to clear their record. There's so much value, Mr. President, in our people. And I am very proud that the policy of this administration is to empower the people of this country. And this is one bill that does that. Our actions, Mr. President, speak loud and clear, and that is why this bill is before this chamber for consideration. Mr. President, I look forward to the support of the members for this critical piece of legislation which seeks to address the lacunae identified in the Principal Act. This administration is not turning its back on those who wish to champion peace and be productive citizens. We see them, and we see their value, even when they made a misstep. And this bill is a first step, and a significant step, towards their reintegration. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Minister. Senator Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, let me say that we welcome on this side the government's effort
and I can even say we commend the administration
Come on.
on seeking to ease what has been a great source of misery for many Jamaicans who have turned a new leaf in their lives and are seeking to escape the shadow of past mistakes. And to that end, I will say that the intent of the legislation and what its provisions are seeking to do broadly enjoys the support of the opposition. Because we believe that a justice system is not singularly about punishment. We believe it is also about rehabilitation. And we believe that individuals who have made a mistake in the past on account of poor judgment should be given an opportunity to be reintegrated into society and contribute to the productive capacity of the country. But as you would appreciate, Minister, notwithstanding supporting the intent of the bill, it doesn't absolve us of the responsibility to carefully examine its design to ensure long-term effectiveness. And I read through the entirety of the bill, and I have some areas that I believe we could tighten to improve governance, credibility, and that long-term effectiveness. And I will start with the foreign convictions. I'll start with that one first, and I want it to be placed on record here. And I know that it has been raised in that other place. But what the amendment is saying here is that if someone overseas commits an offense and it is expunged overseas, then that individual is eligible for that offense to be expunged here in Jamaica, notwithstanding it being on our third schedule, whereby it is not expungible. So the problem with that is we believe that if an offense is expungible in a foreign jurisdiction, then it must be expungible here in Jamaica. Because what it does is the creation of disparity. Someone overseas commits an offense, and if overseas jurisdiction expunges that record, then that offense is eligible for expungement in Jamaica. But if someone in Jamaica commits a similar offense, then that offense is not eligible. We think that consideration should be given to equal treatment in the eyes of the law. The second area that I'm slightly concerned about, that I would make a suggestion, is Section 9B of the amendment bill, which seeks to amend Section 28 of the Principal Act. And Section 9B creates for automatic expungement of an offense for which a non-custodial sentence was imposed, provided that certain conditions are met. And the first condition is that the sentence was imposed before January 1, 2005, and the second is that the penalty was satisfied before January 1, 2005. And the third condition, which I have a slight issue with and would like to proffer a suggestion, is where the person has been convicted of any other offense, whether before or after the conviction in question, then that individual is not, or that offense is not eligible for automatic expungement. The challenge with this, Mr. President, that I think, if we are saying that after a period of time, we believe that you have not committed an offense after that period of time, you have been sufficiently rehabilitated, then you are eligible for expungement of your record. But we are saying on this side, irrespective of the number of offenses committed prior to the start of that period of rehabilitation, which would be prior to January 1, 2005, so if you committed one offense, two offenses or three offenses that happened prior to January 1, 2005, then you should be eligible for automatic expungement and not be subjected to the application process. Because as you said, Minister, the resources of the board are limited, and they should be directed at more egregious offenses, and they should be concentrated at the numerous applications that are coming in. So I'm thinking that irrespective of the number of offenses prior to January 1, 2005, we should allow for automatic expungement. What this amendment says is that if there is more than one offense, whether prior to January 2005 or after January 2005, then that individual will be subjected to the regular application process. There's no automatic expungement. And I'm just thinking about efficiency. I'm thinking about the limited resources. And I'm thinking about how we could ease the application process. And I'm also thinking, if we are satisfied that from 2005, January 1 to present, if no offense is committed, we believe the individual is sufficiently rehabilitated. I am saying, irrespective of the number of offenses prior to the start of that period, we should just allow for automatic expungement. Those are the two considerations that we have on this side, Mr. President. But broadly, we accept that this amendment is heading in the right direction. And it's a continuation of what began in our last administration. You will see that in 2014, we made an amendment that allowed the expungement of record relating to the offense of the possession of marijuana. So we are happy that the government is pursuing a path that is in alignment with the progressive vision that we have, on this side have for Jamaica. So in closing, Mr. President, well done to the government on advancing this. And I hope, Mr. President, that they will consider the recommendations that I've posited. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tomlinson. I'm taking some time because this is Senator Bennett Cooper's maiden presentation, so I ask you to recognize her in the usual way.
May it so please you, Mr. President. I rise today to contribute to the debate on the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Amendment Bill. It is not often or always that we get second chances. And the second chances provided by this bill extends, Mr. President, beyond individual persons with convictions. It extends and has an impact on families, on communities, and the nation as a whole. But what, Mr. President, are some of the implications of this bill? Mr. President, I'd submit to you that there are significant implications for the board, the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Board. With the membership of the board being increased from 5 to 9, this will allow for increased number of sittings with increased and expedited decisions. With more members and more sittings, more applications for expungement can be disposed of and more persons benefit. Mr. President, the expansion of the discretion of the board to now consider expungement for persons with convictions of up to 10 years is also of some import. With this increase in the threshold up from 5 years, significantly more persons have become eligible to have their records expunged. Simply put, Mr. President, more persons can apply for expungement of their records. Mr. President, in setting out the matters into which the board may make inquiries, the amendment to Section 23 is welcomed. It enables an applicant for expungement to approach his application with confidence, as he can now answer questions such as, what is the board required to consider? It tells the applicant what kind of evidence, information, and documentation he should provide to the board. And I submit to you, Mr. President, that this amendment has provided well-needed clarity. And I also, Mr. President, particularly appreciate the amendment to Section 10 of the Principal Act, which spotlights the recognition of the constitutional rights of citizens when making reference to a conviction. This gives more protection to individuals and more respect for their dignity and constitutional rights. Mr. President, I have a particular and deep interest in the welfare, growth, and development of the younger generation and the children of this nation. And when we consider a person under the age of 18 years in the context of criminal convictions, it can be heartbreaking to consider that they have to journey through life with the implications of such convictions. So I am particularly pleased that the amendment expanded the rehabilitation period for persons who were under the age of 18 at the time when the offense was committed. Mr. President, victimless crimes have always and often concerned me. And where you are actually given a chance at redemption in circumstances where you were convicted of a victimless crime, it is, well, Mr. President, it is good. It is a most excellent thing. So, for example, Mr. President, it is not that long ago that persons were convicted for the possession of small quantities of ganja, whether or not they had it for medicinal or religious purposes or otherwise. And when there was no other person being affected by that possession. And here we are now, many years later, where these persons are still burdened with these convictions. And in several instances, this is their only conviction. They have none other. I submit to you, Mr. President, and it is my own respectful view, that the opportunity for automatic expungement of such convictions is timely. And I look forward to the public education program that, if I recall correctly, was mentioned by the Honorable Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs in the lower house. It is important that persons, that Jamaicans get an in-depth understanding of which convictions are eligible, which are not, how to apply for expungement, what is involved in rehabilitation, and all the factors to be considered by the board when they determine the applications for expungement. It is important, Mr. President, for persons to be given hope. Hope that finally, at last, you can now get rid of that conviction. You can now get rid of that criminal record that has been holding you down and holding you back from getting on with your life and making choices for the betterment of your family. So, Mr. President, here we are now, that if you are now rehabilitated, you are re-socialized, you have paid your debt to society, or you have offered or made restitution, you've gone through a psychological evaluation, you have accepted responsibility for the commission of the offense, you have demonstrated remorse, are you not entitled to a second chance? Yes, you are. And this amendment bill offers the opportunity for second chances. And, Mr. President, it has my full support. And I thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me the opportunity to participate in this very important debate.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Bennett Cooper. Senator Bernard.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I'm just dealing with a housekeeping matter. I apologize. Senator Brown. Senator Brown. I'm just being informed that the IDs will be ready on Tuesday. Yeah, I'm sorry to have disturbed you, Mr. Tomlinson. Yeah, that's what information I was getting. Eh? In February, yes. Go ahead, Senator Tomlinson. I apologize. I apologize.
Thank you.
Bernard, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Much has been said in this debate in the lower and upper house about balance, public safety, and second chances. But the measure of the bill, Mr. President, must not be in its language only, but it must be in its effect. This legislation concedes quite openly the rigid thresholds under the existing law produce unjust outcomes, including mass rejection of applications from persons who had discernibly rehabilitated themselves. Yet, instead of confronting the flaw at its roots, the bill merely shifts it, replacing one arbitrary ceiling with another. The expansion from 5 to 10 years does not eliminate exclusion. It simply redraws the line. Rehabilitation does not cease to exist at the 10-year mark, and sentence length cannot continue to serve as a proxy for irredeemability. The same pattern appears in the proposed 15-year rehabilitation period. We are told this is a safeguard, yet no empirical justification has been advanced to explain how delaying reintegration for 15 years promotes public safety or even rehabilitation. Prolonged exclusion from employment, mobility, and social legitimacy is not a neutral policy choice. It actively undermines reintegration and increases the very risk the bill claims to safeguard against. Delay in this context becomes punishment by another means. Mr. President, we are also asked to take comfort in discretion vested in the Criminal Records Rehabilitation Board. But discretion without enforceable standards is not protection. It is uncertainty. The bill expands eligibility and increases board membership. And I heard the previous speaker extrapolating from that to mean expeditious engagement with cases that are brought before. But the bill expanding eligibility and increased board members, but it remains silent on the important components of timeliness, reasoned decisions, and remedies for delays. Without procedural guarantees, Mr. President, embedded in the law, expanded access risk becoming more elusive, converting rehabilitation in a paper promise rather than the lived reality. Mr. President, we need to avoid the bureaucratic delays that undermine similar reforms of the past and the
Clause 11 and the amendments provided for the second schedule with relation to increasing the number of directors could have gone further. The experience under the Access to Information Act, for example, Mr. President, where a recent survey by Jamaican for Justice found that nearly 1/3 of statutory information requested received no response within the mandatory 30 days period, and another third received no response at all. This, my fear, Mr. President, might befall this important amendment. It's against this background, Mr. President, that it would be useful to disclose performance data under the existing Rehabilitation of Offenders Act, specifically the average time between application for expungement, determination.
I'm a coach, yeah. You need coaching.
So let me say this again, Mr. President. No. Let me repeat. Let me repeat. Right, so it's against the background of delays in bureaucracy that I am suggesting it would have been useful to disclose performance data under the existing Rehabilitation of Offenders Act, specifically the average time between application for expungement, determination by the criminal records of boards, and the actual expungement. Clause 11, as I mentioned earlier, which amended the second schedule, should specify a minimum number of meetings of the Rehabilitation Board to guard against this administrative inertia. Mr. President, the amendment to the second schedule should also require the Rehabilitation Board submit its annual report to the Minister for Cabinet consideration and for tabling in Parliament. Now, we know that we have the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act that requires this, but we know of the chronic non-compliance with this requirement. By 164 public bodies are supposed to be reported, and we have seen cases where decades have passed and none have. So a suggestion being put forward here to avoid the bureaucratic delays is to ensure that these are enshrined in the legislation and not left up to goodwill. Mr. President, the bottom line is that the bill strengthens the promise of rehabilitation, but without timelines, meeting requirements, and enforceable reporting, it risks producing some administrative failures that have undermined other progressive reform before this. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Bernard. Senator Apka Fitzenley.
Thank you, sir. I intend to, via my contribution today, show that there can be great utility in terms of submissions to the Parliament, exercised in brevity. I won't be long, sir. I won't be very long. I rise to make my contribution to debate on the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Amendment Act 2025, known across sections of the island as the expungement law. And this bill has my strong support due to a few factors. It brings our legislative process, that is Jamaica, in line with what is considered international best practice. And when I was assessing the various legislations across the world, it is very clear that in many countries, many continents, territories which are considered developed, the whole concept of forgiveness, when there is demonstrable rehabilitation in the behavior of those who have offended, is a concept which is codified and indeed supported and espoused in law. In the United Kingdom, you have what's called the spent convictions law. In sections of North America, there is the record suspension law. In the subcontinent, you have similar laws. Also, down under, in the Oceania continent, you have what is called the Clean Slate Act. Yes, the Automatic Concealment Clean Slate Act. So, passage of the law today, of this bill today, brings Jamaica in line with what is considered international best practice. That's one factor why I support passage of this bill. The second reason is that as I travel across the country, I am encountered by people who often come up about issues that are affecting them. Some ask for a farm work card. Even on the campaign trail in 2025, Senator Brown, many people came up to me. Even folks who are supportive of no political party, some supportive of the Labour Party, some supportive of the PNP. And they weren't saying time come, you know. Some were saying I have an issue. Many years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I made a mistake. I offended the law. And I want a help. I want a bit of help with the expungement that I'm able to move my life forward to assist my family and my community. So an erstwhile lawmaker, an eminent lawmaker once said the law is not a shackle. I'm not too sure about that. Perhaps that is subject to debate. But another part of that statement, which I can give full agreement to, is that the law is a tool of social engineering. And there's a problem across society, which I'm confident that this law, this bill, when passed into law, will play a great part in assisting. I can support Senator Bennett Cooper's submissions regarding public education, because from time to time, laws are passed in the Parliament of Jamaica, and our citizens are not aware of the opportunities for the advancement in their personal lives, which the law provides. So I am supporting the call for a rigorous public education exercise to be encountered when this bill is passed into law by His Excellency. And from time to time, as I read some of the debates in parliaments across the world and in societies across the world, when expungement laws are being debated, there are some sectors who regard it as being the administration of the day being easy on criminality. That is not so. That is not so. Certainly not the case with the administration of Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness. As a matter of fact, this administration has not been bashful about bringing to the Parliament draconian but apposite legislation to deal with criminality in society. We had amendments to the Anti-Gang Law, amendments to the Firearms Act, and those strong pieces of legislation are a significant part of the reason why today the police can indicate that there has been a 54% reduction in murders across society and a 38% reduction in shootings in Jamaica. So let it not be mistaken. This administration is not coy about applying legislation which might be contemplated as draconian, which is appropriate in dealing with the social ills of the day. But the passage of this bill which is being debated, I'm of the view, can be contemplated as a recognition by the administration that it takes a holistic approach, a multi-pronged approach to address the issue of violence across society. And part of that is giving encouragement to people who might have offended but have demonstrated that they are willing to turn a different page. As I close, sir, I'd just offer As I close, I'd just offer a word of encouragement to people who stand to benefit from passage of this draft legislation. To our many citizens who will benefit from its passage, I urge our brothers and sisters, do not squander this opportunity. Take advantage of the second chance. This is a listening administration. We understand your plight, your need, and therefore we have brought this bill to the Parliament to give you a chance to be a better citizen. Commit to being positive contributors to your own welfare, that of your family, and society on a whole. For the aforementioned reasons, sir, the bill has my strong support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Abka Fitzhenley. Senator Brown.
Thank you, President. I rise to contribute to the debate on this bill, conscious that I am among the majority of Jamaican citizens who have never run afoul of the law. Yes. I've never ran afoul of the law. In my 72 almost years on this earth, I have never been convicted, nor have any need for expungement. But I'm going to deal with that frontally and expose your hypocrisy. That's what I'm going to do. So, President, it's against that background that I support the need for those of our citizens who may have infringed the law and been convicted to be given a second chance. Let's be clear. A second chance was given on Calvary, where the old rugged cross was not alone. There were others on the hill in Calvary who had offended. But the redemptive approach was evident long before we got independence, long before we were even discovered by Columbus. Point I'm making is that it's part of our human nature to forgive, to redeem. And I say that because every October, we teach our kids about our national heroes. And outside of October, too. But I've said it before in this Senate, and I'm going to repeat it. Of the 7 national heroes, 4 were convicted. Sam Sharp, William Gordon, Paul Bogle, Marcus Garvey. And a 5th was charged for manslaughter, Alexander Bustamante, and tried. I made the point that we praise our national heroes, rightly so. Rightly so, rightly so.
I'm just asking to recognize that we passed legislation to expunge the conviction of all the 4 members that...
I was here when it happened. I was here when it happened. Point I'm making is that it is natural for us as Jamaicans to be forgiving and to recognize that that is the reality we face as a nation. And I hear my friends on the other side saying, context matter. And I thought about that. let me share some with you about context matter. In 1971-72, I played football for JC. At the time, we have the pictures, but at the time, President, Ukraskill described the fearless defender that I was. The term he used for me was chopper. That is in 72. If today I'm called a chopper, it's a different context. So I recognize the conviction of our heroes took place in a different context. But they were convicted. And as I said, 3 were executed, lost their life, paid the ultimate price. So much, Minister Dixon, that famous letter from the prison cell of George Gordon Williams must never be lost on our students. With the letter to his wife from the prison cell. And I made that point because one of the songs that I grew up, and you grew up, President, enjoying, was a song which was entitled simply by 4 digits, 5446. That's my number. That's Toots and the Maytals. In 2014, we passed legislation to expunge convictions like those for Toots and others. And some minister, and I think you, Senator Fitzgerald, spoke about people being blighted by convictions for ganja. We dealt with that in 2014. Senator Sinclair had a little difficulty because he felt it was too rigid. And I know you're going to speak next. But you have not come here to ask for abolition of the 3rd schedule. You are tweaking it. I recall you moving a resolution in the parish council in St. James.
Yes.
About that.
She's going to amend the legislation.
So, I start with that. But, President, I can't end without pointing out to my friend, Senator Fitzgerald, that it's one thing. Yeah, man, I'm cheer for Manchester United. It's one thing. It's one thing, correct? It's one thing to come here and tell us how you support this bill. But every day, including today, you seek to sully my character, my reputation, because before you were born the 17th of January, 1989. But before you were born in 1980, yeah, I checked you out your birth this morning. I was arrested. I was arrested twice, Senator Morgan. I'm going to tell you now. Yes, it is about me, about people who the law has taken a certain position on. Some convicted, but like me, the first time, not Gateway, arrested at Meadowbrook High School for failing to move and keep on moving because I was defending workers' rights. I'm going to come to the BAM position. You wasn't even born. You wasn't even born. And you talk about BAM. Mr. President, on the 25th of October 1980, I was arrested. I was arrested. They come here and keep throwing barbs across the fence and say they agree with expungement. I was never even asked. I was never even asked to plea. I was never even asked to plea. Well, you know, Siaga was the Prime Minister. I was never even asked to plea. There was no evidence against me. I wasn't even acquitted. The judge simply said, go on in your yard, we have nothing. But people like him is out there saying, I had bomb in my car. I had no car. I had no car in Hanover. I had no car in Hanover. No, I'm not trying to case. The case has, in fact, of the other people who were arrested, none of them was convicted. None of them need expungement. So, I can understand how people feel who were convicted. If when somebody wasn't convicted, they, on that side, descend to the gutter to speak about what I am. This is personal. This is personal. And if you press it, I will simply say, this guy, arrested in 1980, in 2007, was honored, like Chris Bovell, with the Order of Distinction Commander Class. I'll tell you where I buy it from after. Outside, I'll tell you where I buy it from. So, I made the point that 46 years after, almost 46 years, they still use that. And I was never convicted, much as the people were convicted. And some of them convicted wrongly. And I made that point because just last year, in this Senate, Minister Arbin Hill spoke about ex-convicts in a disparaging manner about ex-convict being at the 2024 conference of the PNP. One of those so-called ex-convicts have received the blessing of the people of East Portland and now sits in the other place as a member of parliament. Senator Hill, and I wonder why my friend isn't here today, having advanced those views, what I said to him in the debate is that Delroy Chuck, in 2019, promised this bill. And therefore, Hill, Fitzhenley, and those who disparage people, some who have never been convicted, and those convicted, they come here now championing support for the people. They come here championing support for the people. When in truth and in fact, their position represents that of hypocrites. I can proudly say, I am not sorry for my past. I will leave the Senate at some point, but I will do so holding my head high.
Thank you, Senator Brown.
I'm not finished.
I'm just saying that we appreciate that.
Holding my head high, knowing that people like you all, find it easier to reside in the gutter. I will take the high road. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Senator Tavares Vincent.
Mr. President, is it on?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Mr. President, I rise today to speak in strong support of the proposed amendments to the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Act. Legislation that reflects not only the firmness of this administration's crime-fighting agenda, but also its belief in fairness, rehabilitation, and national renewal. Jamaica has, in recent times, achieved measurable and historic success in reducing crime. In 2025, our country recorded 673 homicides, a 41% reduction compared to 2024, and the lowest annual total in over 30 years, falling below 700 for the first time since 1994. This achievement did not happen by chance. It was the result of strategic policing, improved intelligence, community engagement, focused anti-gang operations, and a clear commitment to public safety. That progress, Mr. President, has continued into 2026. As of January 24, Jamaica recorded 27 murders, representing a 54% reduction compared to 59 during that same period last year. These are encouraging signs, Mr. President, that the policies being implemented are working and that Jamaica is moving steadily towards a safer future. Mr. President, crime reduction is not sustained by enforcement alone. While law enforcement plays a critical role, we must also address the root causes of crime and the conditions that lead individuals back into conflict with the law. That is where this proposed amendment becomes both relevant and necessary, Mr. President. The current proposal seeks to expand the list of offenses eligible for rehabilitation and expungement, allowing more individuals who have served their sentences and demonstrated reform the opportunity to move forward without the lifelong burden of a criminal record. This is not an abandonment of accountability, Mr. President. Rather, it is a recognition that justice must evolve beyond punishment towards restoration. Too often, a criminal record becomes a permanent barrier, blocking access to employment, housing, education, and even entrepreneurship. When individuals are denied legitimate opportunities, Mr. President, they are more likely to return to crime. Not because they want to, but because society has closed every other door. This amendment helps to break that cycle. By giving deserving citizens a structured second chance, we increase their ability to participate meaningfully in the economy, support their families, and contribute positively to their communities. In doing so, Mr. President, we reduce recidivism, strengthen social stability, and ultimately enhance public safety, which is without a doubt the very goal of our crime-fighting strategy. Mr. President, we must also pause to remember that those affected by these provisions are not statistics. They are people, citizens of our beloved country. Many Jamaicans who made mistakes at a young age, often shaped by circumstances of poverty, limited opportunity, or negative influence, they have since accepted responsibility, complied with the law, and demonstrated genuine change. As a society rooted in strong moral and faith-based traditions, we believe in redemption, forgiveness, and the power of transformation. The proposed amendments acknowledge that growth is possible and that past wrongdoing should not permanently eclipse present character. This administration is clear in that intent. Rehabilitation must lead to reintegration. We want former offenders to return to society not as outsiders, but as productive, law-abiding citizens, employees, entrepreneurs, parents, and community leaders. By removing unnecessary legal barriers, we are empowering individuals to earn an honest living, contribute to the tax base, and participate fully in normal life. This is how we replace hopelessness with purpose and prevent yesterday's offenders from becoming tomorrow's repeat cases. Compassion, Mr. President, when paired with accountability, is not weakness. It is sound governance and smart crime prevention. Mr. President, this legislation also aligns with the Andrew Holness administration's vision, which calls for inclusive growth, social equity, and the development of human capital. Rehabilitation and reintegration are not acts of leniency. They are investments in national development. Every rehabilitated citizen who becomes a taxpayer, employee, or business owner is a gain for Jamaica. Importantly, the proposed amendments retain safeguards. Not every offense qualifies, and expungement remains conditional on good behavior and on the passage of time. This ensures that public confidence in the justice system is preserved, while still allowing room for compassion and proportionality. We must also acknowledge the powerful signal this amendment sends, particularly to young people. It tells them that mistakes do not have to define a lifetime, that the state believes in reform, and that lawful living is rewarded with opportunity. That message, combined with declining crime figures, strengthens trust between citizens and the institutions that serve them. Mr. President and members of this Senate, Jamaica is at a pivotal moment. We are seeing the benefits of decisive actions against crime. And we now have an opportunity to lock in those gains by addressing reintegration and rehabilitation in a meaningful way. Expanding the Criminal Records Act is not a departure from our crime-fighting strategy. It is a natural and necessary extension of it. In closing, I urge the Senate to support these amendments. Let us continue to be firm on crime, but also fair in justice. Let us recognize that a safer Jamaica is built not only by reducing offenses, but by restoring lives. By giving certain citizens a second chance, we strengthen families, community, and the nation as a whole. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Tavares, for instance. Senator Professor Floyd Morris. We're getting the 1 minute. I'm sorry, Floyd. We're getting the thing for you.
Oh, I don't need this one too long.
Thank you very much, Senator Morris.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise to make my contribution to this very important piece of legislation, which we on this side, as Senator Tomlinson pointed out, agrees with the general objects of the legislation. And in my brief intervention, Mr. President, I want to point out the absolute importance of ongoing rehabilitation in an attempt to provide justice to the people of our country. You see, Mr. President, in this journey of life, we all, from time to time, make mistakes. And, you know, when we recognize that we make mistakes and seek our forgiveness and go through the rehabilitation process, it is incumbent upon the state to make sure that measures are put in place to facilitate the smooth and orderly inclusion of those individuals in the society. And I see that in this piece of legislation, which is nothing new in the grand scheme of things, Mr. President, because the effort to make provision for the rehabilitation of our citizens and their smooth and orderly inclusion in society never started in 2025 or 2026. Because if you look back at various pieces of legislation and programs that have been established, dating back to even 1978 with the Parole Act, and efforts by administration in the 1990s and 2000 to ensure that prisoners were engaged in the learning of skills and trades and feeding themselves, all part of the rehabilitation process. And undoubtedly, Mr. President, we have to include in those seminal pieces of legislation the work done by the leader of the opposition when he was Minister of Justice to make sure that those charged for offenses where marijuana is concerned, to give them a second chance. And so we commend those efforts, and it's within the similar context that we want to continue the commendations. But, you know, Mr. President, there's something that jumps at me in this piece of legislation, and Senator Tomlinson pointed to it in his presentation. When we start examining a bill, generally the first place we go is to look at the memorandum of objects, and that is exactly what I did, and looked at C in the memorandum of objects, which points to a situation where the board is empowered to make decisions where a person who has committed an offense in another jurisdiction and that offense has been expunged, but it's not expungible in Jamaica, even if it is a violation of the in the third schedule. And you know, Mr. President, as I looked at the bill, you know, I am wondering if, for example, somebody who commits an offense like rape in Qatar, because rape is an offense in the third schedule, if an individual commits an offense in Qatar like rape, and that has been expunged, and he should come to Jamaica, where that rape is not an expungible offense based on the third schedule. I want to find out if that situation is going to be. Mr. President, you know, I am giving an example, Mr. President. In no way, it seems as if I've thrown a stone in a pen. I've thrown a stone in a pen. But, Mr. President, you know, I am wondering about a situation like that, and if in such a scenario where an egregious act has been committed elsewhere and it has been expunged, but it's not applicable in our context, what would happen in that situation here? And I would like to get some clarity on that. No matter how much blabbering the member opposite want to make, I would want to find out what would happen in such a situation. And in that regard, Mr. President, because I am very aware of the utterances of the member opposite in the past about amendments that were done to the legislation by the leader of the opposition. And today we are here in this honorable chamber, and as Senator Lambert Brown has said, you know, I really hope that the member has an opportunity now to make an amendment to the legislation. And I am waiting to see if he is coming with any amendment to deal with the schedule that he had so much problem with in the past. So, Mr. President, I want to give my support to the bill and ask for some clarification on the point that was raised by Senator Tomlinson and amplified by myself. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Professor. And just to inform you, Senator Morris, that you have an opportunity to hear from Senator Sinclair with respect to the question concerning Qatar immediately.
I have no idea about Qatar. I have no idea. I don't even know what you're talking about. Thank you. All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I stand here with firm conviction in support of this bill entitled An Act to Amend the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Act. Mr. President, the records of this Parliament and other public records will confirm that I have been a strong advocate for amendments to be made to the Principal Act to give greater access to citizens who found themselves in conflict with the law to be relieved of the burden of a criminal record. I did so during the debate on the passage of the regulations on the Electricity Act in 2017, and I also did so in my contribution to the State of the Nation debate in 2024. And in the St. James Municipal Corporation in April of 2024, I got unanimous support on a resolution calling on the Minister of Justice to advance a bill as we have before us today. And I hear my friends across the aisle screaming about calling for an amendment wholesale in the third schedule. If you will listen keenly to the presentations and the examples that I used, it was not for a whole-scale amendment of the third schedule. I gave specific examples, and I still have them here today, and I will speak on them. So, Mr. President, I feel confident in saying that after today, hundreds of Jamaicans will be satisfied knowing that this Honorable Senate will pass these amendments. And from the comments that I have heard over there, and I'm going to address you, Senator Brown, because you made mention of people being hypocritical on this side. And I will get to that in a short moment. Right? But many Jamaicans will be afforded a new lease on life. Mr. President, interestingly, this bill, which has at its core the principle of second chance, comes at a critical juncture in Jamaica's historical journey. And I take the opportunity to make mention of two. Firstly, Mr. President, the massive reduction in our crime statistics with the various strategies and involvement of stakeholders is one that with the reduction, we're giving Jamaica a second chance. Mr. President, we have heard other speakers before where the murder rate was, and we have brought it down to below 700. And with the trajectory that we are looking at, we expect a further reduction. Mr. President, that is breathing a new life into Jamaica and will give opportunities for investment. So, second chance for Jamaica in that regard is something that I find fitting to comment on. Mr. President, we recently had the passage of Melissa, and it has exposed several challenges. Challenges which go to the root of good order, good public order, and management. And we should never allow this opportunity to pass without implementing steps and programs and committing ourselves to doing things bigger and better in several areas. And I can look on the areas generally of waste management, infrastructure development, institutional strengthening, in particular at the local government level, amongst others. We are getting a second chance in that regard, Mr. President. And second chances should never be wasted. Mr. President, the principle of second chance in this bill before us has at its root a belief in forgiveness, redemption, and the power of the human spirit. It captures the belief that every individual deserves a chance to redeem themselves, to start afresh, and pursue their dreams with renewed vigor. Our past should never be allowed to define us. As people, we all make mistakes in life, but that does not mean we have to pay for them for the rest of our life. Good people, Mr. President, sometimes make bad choices. This does not mean that they are bad. It means that they are human. The scripture, Mr. President, captures the principle of second chance in this quote. You have never gone too far that God can't redeem you. You didn't know that one, Senator Morgan. Restore you, forgive you, and to give you a second chance. Mr. President, second chance legislation being supported by Scripture gives it a solid foundation. It is legislation which takes people's lives into consideration, and it reflects a government of compassion, a government which cares for its people. Mistakes are made, and when made, may come with consequences. But our system of justice, the system that we operate in Jamaica, recognizes fair punishment for infractions of the law. But that very same system, Mr. President, facilitates the process of rehabilitation. And we must, in every appropriate case, give those who have encountered the legal system and who have established their rehabilitation an opportunity to start afresh and pursue their dreams with renewed vigor. Mr. President, it is a historical fact that it has been the Jamaica Labour Party administrations which have shown this level of care for the people of this island with the implementation of second chance legislation. It was this administration which introduced this very same act, the principal act that we are amending today in 1988. Our leaders at the time were committed to a policy which recognized that expungement of one's criminal record is important to allow our citizens a chance to pursue opportunities, including employment and travel. And the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Andrew Holness, has maintained as a policy of this administration, Mr. President, that we must do everything possible, including moral suasion and incentivization, to bring more Jamaicans into the labor force. And Mr. President, these amendments are consistent with that policy. Mr. President, this administration must be applauded for introducing other second chance legislation which have been passed. So we have passed in this Parliament the Child Diversion Act. We have passed the Restorative Justice Act. And we heard commentary across the aisle regarding our national heroes, Mr. President. This administration was the administration that passed the national heroes and other freedom fighters absolution from criminal liability in respect of specified acts, Act of 2017. So the comments made by my friend across the aisle, we have shown, not only in words, but in action, we were the ones that absolved them in respect to the offenses for which they would have been convicted, and many others. Many others. And you know, we continue to stand in that regard. We continue to stand in that regard, Mr. President, because we believe that our ancestors on whose shoulders we stand as a free, strong, and proud nation, we have absolved them of their deemed criminal action. And you know, when we look on the history of Marcus Garvey, I mustn't forget these things, you know, taught in civics, where he was given a criminal record in the United States of America. We are fighting and challenging that and seeking to have that, in effect, expunged, Mr. President. And in that regard, commendations to our minister, Minister Oliver Babsy Grange, who has been leading in that particular fight to seek that expungement. Mr. President, there are few aspects of the bill which are of significant importance. So we have Clause 2.
Sorry, Marcus Garvey was convicted in Jamaica as well, you know.
As well in Jamaica.
And that conviction was in the same legislation.
In the yes.
Yeah.
So we are the persons.
Because one of the
things,
aside from the source of it, one of the things that we had been agitating for a long time to have Marcus Garvey conviction in the United States dealt with, and we maintain his conviction on our books. So when the Parliament and both sides passed that piece of legislation, it was important because people were able to point and say, oh, you're fighting to have Marcus Garvey's conviction dealt with in the United States, and there was a conviction here. So it was important that we, as a Parliament, had passed it. Yes, Senate. Yes,
I am certain he's not going to come in.
Mr. President, you have interrupted the member's presentation without a point of order.
No, man, I interrupted.
But I don't understand, you know. I don't understand, Mr. President. What is the purpose of the committee?
No, Senator Morris, he invited my intervention.
I have not objected. I have not objected.
So all I'm saying,
the right is mine.
What I'm saying, Senator Sinclair, is that the good thing is that we didn't just deal with the issue or try to deal with the issues outside of the jurisdiction. We dealt with Marcus Garvey's conviction in Jamaica.
That is correct, Mr. President, and so I made reference in response to the comment made by my friend across there. So, Mr. President, Clause 2 increases the sentence threshold for eligibility for expungement from 5 to 10 years. We have Clause 9, which provides for the automatic expungement of offenses where a non-custodial sentence was imposed and the penalty satisfied before January 1, 2005. And I just want to pause to say that that particular amendment is important because as I read it, and I had discussions with the Honorable Minister in respect to the width of that particular amendment, it overrides the third schedule. So any offense, as it says in this particular section, it says any offense for which a sentence other than imprisonment is imposed, if the sentence was imposed before January 1, 2005, the penalty concerned has been satisfied before January 1, 2005, and the person has not been convicted of any other offense. Every offense which got a non-custodial sentence, even if they fell under the third schedule, is able to get the benefit of this particular amendment. And Mr. President, interestingly, because I've been approached by many persons, I have a letter which I received from someone who was convicted of a third schedule offense in 2001. 2001. Here's the letter. 2001, he got a conviction for a third schedule offense. And all that was imposed on him were fines. Fines, minimal fines, $5,000 fine, $5,000 and $9,000 fine. Wasn't given a custodial sentence. And he has lived a good and clean life. He made an application, Mr. President, and it shows that it touches real people. In 2015, he got a letter. And I will just read the last part of what he got. In his response, it came from the Ministry of Justice. I am directed by the board to inform you that the conviction, and as I said, it's a third schedule offense. I can read all of it. It says illegal possession of firearm and illegal possession of ammunition. He was a licensed firearm holder. Are incapable of being expunged as these offenses fall under the third schedule of the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Act 2014. Right? So, the amendment, you know, Mr. President, is one that is far-reaching. Because this person would have asked me, what is it expected of me? I have lived a good and clean life all of these years. I have reformed, I have rehabilitated, right? And so he will now have the benefit, as I understand it, of that particular amendment. Clause 11, Mr. President, which expands the membership of the board and adjusting the quorum, is significant. Clause 12, which amends certain aspects of the third schedule. These amendments should go a far way in benefiting hundreds of Jamaicans who have had conflicts with the law, rehabilitated, but were being held back in their desire for renewed life because of a criminal record. And Mr. President, I want to just zoom in a little bit on the third schedule. The third schedule was authored in 2014. When I look across the aisle, I see Senator Lambert Brown. I see Senator Floyd Morris. Well, you were president at the time.
Well, Senator Morris did not participate in that debate. He was above the fray, and he did not have to vote.
He was the person who presided and probably signed that particular bill. Yes. You know? And when I look at who would have been the persons who have led that charge in bringing the third schedule, Minister of Justice, the current leader of opposition, and the Minister of National Security, now Member of Parliament, Sir Peter Bunting, were the persons who led the charge on that side. And the way that it was done, Mr. President, I went to Hansard. And I got the presentation that was made by the Minister Bunting at the time. And he took up what? Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages of answer. And the third schedule was slipped in almost in a clandestine way. No comment about it. No information to the public that, look here, we're making some offenses unexpungible. And by making it unexpungible, Senator Brown, I said it was almost. You give it a little one-line comment. Right? Yes, sir. But you must educate the people and let them know what it is that you are bringing. Because what you did by doing that is that you put some people on the rubbish heap. You put persons who would have probably even paid a fine because of a transgression of one of the offenses that you put in the third schedule. Persons who would have been rehabilitated. Yes. But guess what happened to them? But today you come here and you don't have any opposition to it. But in 2014, what you did, you voted Senator Brown to say that, guess what? You go through the legal system, you are penalized even by a fine, but you will never be able to clear that criminal record. Right? So, what you did was almost in a clandestine way. I said one line in 5 pages. Mr. President, when I see the amount of persons that have approached me, persons who are teachers, taxi operators, firefighter came to me in December and asked me when this legislation going to pass, because he found himself, when he was a youngster, in breach of one item. Right? Well, he's a firefighter. I don't know. Farm workers, it stands in his way because he says he cannot elevate. That is his response. Farm workers wanting to take advantage of overseas employment and other persons. Mr. President, we have real life cases. Mr. President, I want to highlight one. I want to highlight one person. And Senator Bernard, I will tell you the last name when we come outside. Right? Right out of the community, the same community that you live in. Mr. Carnell, barred by the inclusion of the 3rd schedule. And you know what Carnell wants to do, Mr. President? Carnell wants to get a badge. Want a badge to drive a taxi. That's all he wants to do. But because of what you had done, Senator Brown, with the 3rd schedule, what you did, because he served his sentence, he paid his fine. Paid his fine. Live a good life. Rehabilitated. Reform. Don't get himself in any problems. Stay away from trouble. But because of your 3rd schedule, yes, can't expunge it. Can't expunge it. So, Mr. President, in my review of this bill, while I give it my full support, whilst I give it my full support, I would have wished for further amendments. I would have wished for further amendments to the bill. But I will leave those positions and those thoughts for another time, because I have confidence in my administration and I have confidence in the commitment that has been given by the Honorable Minister Delroy Chuck in his closing of the debate in the lower house, where he gave a commitment that this legislation will be kept under constant review, so we can continue to have those discussions. For now, I believe a fair, balance, and significant forward step have been made and must be supported. Mr. President, this bill, once passed, will make our expungement legislation one of the more liberal in the region. But as we pass this bill, Mr. President, we must also continue to give our attention to improving the correctional services and the prison system, particularly having regard that the period given for offenders who have experienced incarceration has increased from 5 years to 10 years. So you're dealing with persons who have had a longer time within the prison system. And in that regard, I am going to support what has been commented on by our Minister of National Security about improvements to be done in the prison infrastructure and the building of a new prison. And as I understand the Minister saying that the lands have been acquired on which a new prison can be constructed, the comments that we have heard in respect to the conditions in our prison system is not good. And it's not an environment in which you can get full rehabilitation. But many things are being done within the system But in particular in relation to the building of a new prison, I understand that the process has reached the stage, land has acquired, and the matter has been taken to the Public Investment Assessment Board and will be ongoing towards that development. But in respect to the rehabilitation process, what is significant is that there are various aspects, and the minister spoke to some of them, in respect to the education of persons who go in, case management, officers being attached to persons, not only in the juvenile system, but also in the adult prisons. And what I found significant is that I understand that currently all the eggs that are used within the system are produced by the inmates. Right? The meats, the vegetables, a lot of them being produced, and it's a part of the whole rehabilitation process. Mr. President, I want to suggest that we implement a work and earn program within the system. I don't think that that exists. Earnings that can offset expenses of the inmate, compensate where needs be of the victim, and also to maintain or assist in the maintenance of their family who is outside of the system. Mr. President, I believe that that can maintain the dignity, for example, of a father who may have left a child at home. But the work and earn system is something that I think can go a far way, and it can maintain family life in spite of the separation that would have been caused by the conflict with the law. Improve the opportunities for our young men, and where possible, to make them mandatory. And Minister also spoke about what is being done at heart. Up to level 4, we must ensure that those programs are to be taken up. And sometimes, Minister, we can't leave everything to them wanting to volunteer. We have to find a way to ensure that our young men stay out of problems and take up what is being offered by the administration, especially, as I said, through heart. We have made it free. No cost to them up to level 4. There are programs under which they can get subsidies for transportation. We have to ensure that our youngsters take advantage of what is being offered. So, President, we continue to improve the structures within communities to engage residents in various activities that build cohesion and support those who are less fortunate and vulnerable. So there are several things that we have to continue to do outside of making just these amendments to this legislation of this kind. We have done a lot, and I know that this administration will continue to do more. But in closing, and I think it was said by Senator Fitzhenry, and I want to support it. Don't take this amendment to be a position that this administration is going to be soft on crime. It does not represent that. Does not represent that. But we recognize that in order to build a peaceful society, a society that is productive, that we have to deal with it in a holistic way. And so those who run in conflict, they are separated from society, separated for a time. But we encourage rehabilitation, and we encourage activities that will keep persons out of conflict with the law. So, Mr. President, I support the legislation, the bill that is before us, and I'm certain that it has, based on the comments I've heard, in spite of the attempted criticisms, that it has the support of all that is here.
Minister? Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Scott Motley.
Mr. President, I am moved by Senator Sinclair's presentation to make a few brief remarks. You know, when I took the bill up, I almost thought I'd brought the wrong one to Parliament, because it is on the back page a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Offences Against a Persons Act. But I would say, as soon as I'm allowed to continue. There is no person, certainly not in the Parliament, who could possibly not support this amendment. Indeed, it has been made clear time and time again who are the persons who suffer. It is persons from a particular class. Those who are voiceless and have to be stopping parliamentarians on the road and begging a chance. Those who are poor and cannot afford high-powered lawyers like Senator Sinclair. Those who are deprived and depressed. And so this Parliament has the opportunity to elevate them to a position where they can have an opportunity to clear their names, clear their records, and reassert their dignity in the society. Who could possibly object to that? Indeed, I have been waiting for this legislation for some time because in the past, I was shadow spokesperson on justice. And when the minister said in his 2018 to 2019 contribution that he was going to put submissions to the cabinet on this matter, I waited with bated breath. Suffice it to say that in his subsequent sectorial debates, presentations, he continued to give us the statistics. But we have waited until 2026 to actually have this bill tabled. Do forgive me if I am not as congratulatory and commendatory as I've seen everywhere and elsewhere. You see, I bring to this debate a level of cynicism because I have had the occasion to call the minister about people. As a minister, can you do anything to help? And one thing I will tell you is that he always says yes. I won't tell you what the results are. There was a woman. I would respond to you now, but I'm not going to. Because I sat on that General Legal Council. I sat on the General Legal Council for many, many years. I have served my country in many capacities without bellowing it. But there was a woman who had committed an offense which I considered to be, in the scheme of things, a minor offense. She had applied for an expungement. Her husband had filed for her to join him in the United States, but she needed to have that conviction expunged. She shed tears because no matter what she did, she could not get a response. Indeed, there are many persons I know whose applications have languished in the Ministry of Justice. Not because they were Schedule 3 offenses, Senator Sinclair, but because the system does not work. And I have to express my cynicism about this legislation. Because Jamaica is fit. We have excellent laws on the books, you know. Trust me, sometimes when I come here and we keep on passing laws, I say, perhaps we could try enforcing those that we have first. Because if we would have a well-regulated and well-ordered society. if we did so, I'm speaking purely from my personal experience, as you have, with people who have begged for a little help, with people who you try to help, but the system does not work. The truth of it is, the minister has said to us that he has placed 2 persons at the Criminal Records Office devoted to this. And I do hope that this helps. But what was missing from the presentation for me was data. I didn't know how many we had in backlogs. I didn't know how many were still outstanding then, how many had not been heard and over one period. Because when I examined the minister's presentation, he gave us, this has come in for this year, this has been cleared, and this is outstanding. But I couldn't get a cumulative kind of idea as to where we stood with expungement. And I thought that where I applaud some of the steps which have been taken in this legislation. I would have liked to have seen, for example, as we have here in the Senate standing orders, the virtual meetings actually being acknowledged as serving some purpose. But I understand that it is very rare when suggestions, even though they have merit, are accepted. And I sincerely hope that those of you who have influence will try to ensure that you monitor the progress of this amendment and, if necessary, ask that it be brought back for an amendment. There is nothing wrong with that. I want to say also that sometimes one needs to be bold and courageous. And you know, in particular, and through you I address Senator Sinclair, how much hardship the new Firearms Act has caused on persons. Let me say, you're not soft on crime when you show compassion. And the way in which the board, the guidelines established for the board, would give the board an opportunity to look beyond the conviction, to see the circumstances, the individual before them, to see what it is to interrogate whether this person is capable of rehabilitation or it's just that they are feeling the full force of the law. So, but I know, listen, I listened to the minister, you know, Senator Sinclair, and I heard his hesitancy and almost his apology. Because in this context, such an action is bound to attract criticism as being soft on crime. But courageous leaders have to understand that there are times when they are going to attract criticism, but they must move with fixity of purpose and compassion, the compassion of which you speak. It is so important for us to demonstrate to those persons who have no voice that we still have a place in our system where they can seek redemption. It's the board could have said no. A board can say no, absolutely not. It's not automatic. They have a discretion. But sometimes the use of that discretion can really provide a pathway for someone who might have been wrongly convicted, might have been convicted under circumstances which are dubious, and they just need a chance because they have paid their price. So Mr. President, who did not intend to speak, provoked by Senator Sinclair to speak, want to say that this bill has my support. And the only thing I would urge is that we look at it soon. And to you, Minister, we need to have a holistic approach towards children, towards juveniles. We can't be on the one hand punishing them for the rest of their life, and on the other hand talking about child diversion. And then now, we can't be on the one hand punishing them for the rest of their life with certain laws which we have passed here to show how strong we are on crime, and then introduce measures which shows that we understand who a juvenile is, and that more than most persons. Dr. Shetty has made presentations to the Joint Select Committee in which he has shown that children who are incarcerated are mainly illiterate, suffering from mental health issues, deprived, dispossessed. And I'm simply saying, please, not with any rancor, not from an opposition point of view, but from simply as a human being, as a mother, I am saying, have a holistic approach towards juveniles, if it pleases you.
Thank you, Senators. Thank you, Senator Scott Motley. Senate Minister.
Mr. President, given that it's 1:21, I ask that we be able to sit beyond 1:20 today. 1:30, sorry.
Members should have heard the question from the Honourable Minister. Those in favour? Against? Minister?
All right.
Right. You poke the bear, you know. Figuratively.
Thank you. All right. Mr. President, as we bring this debate to a close, I thank all of you for your contributions. I'm, however, want to know that, I've been through everything and I'm going to respond. And so let me go through each of the areas. I took some notes here. Senator Tomlinson, it was good to see you doing the response. I know you raised the issue of what happens to individuals who are overseas, have been convicted, come to Jamaica, and you had noted that, there is some issue of equity there vis-a-vis what happens to a Jamaican, where a Jamaican's case cannot be heard or be considered for expungement, whereas someone coming from overseas may be able to. And I know I heard that echoed also with Senator Professor Morris. You had asked a very similar question in relation to that. And let me just note that there are many jurisdictions that do report to Jamaica and share information on convictions. I did not check specifically on Qatar and rape and whether or not that is it is expungible. But the reality is that from a policy standpoint, we had noted that there are many Jamaicans who are returning home, Mr. President, who are coming from jurisdictions where we really can't speak to their criminal justice system. And so the intent behind it was that we have these individuals returning to Jamaica with convictions. We don't know what would have happened, the circumstances around it. But it does not give them an automatic expungement. What the bill says is that they may be considered for expungement. So it's a case-by-case basis. So it's not that there is any wholesale attempt to say that if you committed a crime overseas and it's expunged or not, that you will automatically get it expunged. It is on a case-by-case basis for that, and that's been our policy intent. And in here, we do see that we've explicitly noted what the board should be considering, and it's a range of things that they should be considering in that respect. You had also made a suggestion also about, whether or not the number of offenses, it shouldn't matter the number of offenses prior to the period. But the question I have for you is, usually if you've committed many, many, many offenses, it says something about that individual. And I think right here we want to be able to move. And I understand that there is that 20-year gap of not a conviction. It doesn't mean that nothing else happened. And so you want to ensure that you actually treat with things carefully. Senator Bennett Cooper, it was also good to hear you for your maiden presentation, which was very good. And I wanted to also note that you had put quite a lot of emphasis on public education, and the minister has already made it clear that this is important. And it is going to be important because I know a lot of people are excited about this amendment, but don't realize it may not be relevant in their case. And so we have to ensure that we speak to Jamaicans about it and sensitize them and let them know what is to come, what's the process, what has actually changed. I know we also heard from Senator Bernard, who also spoke about many different areas of it, and it was good to hear your thoughts too. And you spoke about redrawing of the line, but I think it's an important redrawing of the line. Going from 5 years to 10 years, I think it's actually very important. But you also mentioned bureaucracy, and several speakers spoke about bureaucracy, that time between application and actually it being considered. And that is an area that we admit is a challenge. And so on the administrative side, it is an area the minister has already made some commitments, especially vis-a-vis working with the CRO, the Criminal Records Office, and trying to move things along more smoothly. And that is something we'll continue to advocate for, because these amendments are nice, but they're not real unless persons are able to access them. And so that is something we're very much seized of, and I think you've already seen some action in that respect. In terms of, so generally what I would say is that, basic administrative requirements, there was a question of whether or not we shouldn't have some minimum times written into the legislation. Don't believe that should be in primary legislation, but we have to make sure that administratively we are good. Senator Fitz-Henley also echoed public education and also the administration not being easy on criminality, and that's important, and I think we both sides agree on that. Senator Brown, it was good to hear you speak of our national heroes and also putting things in some historical context there too, and also telling your story, your personal story, and I'll tell you my story, why this actually is meaningful for me. When I returned to Jamaica, probably around 2007 and 2008, I used to go to St. Catherine District Prison. It's not called that anymore. It's now called St. Catherine Adult Correctional Center, much nicer sounding. I used to go there on a Friday as a part of prison ministry. I wanted to know what happens in a prison. My only route in was going and praying for them, right? But it was useful. It was good to pray. No, we don't. But it was good to go there and pray with them. And I remember going into the chapel on those Fridays and the prisoners being brought in. And we'd sit and we'd sing and we'd pray, and you got to know them. And when you heard their stories, you realize they're not bad people. Circumstances were against them. They were born in particular situations. They never had the right example around them. And so that really always stuck with me, always stuck with me. And then I remember as church, one of the things we would do for those who would come regularly into the chapel was when they were being released or near to being released, we'd work with Food for the Poor and other donors to give them baby chicks and chicken coop wire. And I always felt that's not enough. What are we saying? You know, after this, you've redeemed yourself, you're coming to church, you're trying to find God, and your only route is chicken farming. And that's one good one because they're able to make a living and be able to have money for their families. It's a start. But I always wanted more, and that's why it's meaningful for me to have Hart under my purview and to be able to have more programs in the prison. Because I want him not just to have that as an option. That's one. That could be one of his many businesses, right? He could be building a conglomerate, and the chicken is the first part of it. But we want to have other options available for them. And so this is important. Senator Tavares Finson, the handsome one, Chair, Mr. President. I'm going to get in trouble. I know. But it was good to hear you again reiterating that the policies being implemented are working. And I heard what you were saying about rehabilitation and reintegration of Jamaicans is an investment in national development, and that is so true. And also you spoke about being strong on crime but fair in justice, and that's really what this administration is all about, and I thank you for the points that you had raised. Senator Morris, I had discussed what you had brought up in terms of your main point in terms of the overseas individuals who had committed crimes overseas and had returned. Senator Sinclair, I know you've been an advocate for this for so long, so today is a triumph for you, Senator Sinclair, and you laid out the history, including the history of the third schedule, and I hear you with wanting more changes, and I assure you, as Minister Chuck had said, that this is just the beginning. Senator Scott Motley, I thank you for your support and pointing out the printing error. Also, on the online version, we see it, but the online version doesn't have it, so it seems to have been an error at the printing office. And your point again on administrative changes being needed, very much agreed. In terms of virtual meetings, just pointing back to Section 10.6 of the second schedule, and it allows the board to regulate its own proceedings, and therefore it doesn't preclude having meetings online and having virtual meetings. The juveniles area that you bring up, I'm there with you. I'm advocating already with Minister Chuck in terms of juveniles, and I do think that in the next iteration, the next amendments, I do think we have to speak more clearly to our juveniles who have been convicted of crime and end up in the juvenile system. So, Mr. President, this bill will allow more persons who were once thrown off track to now continue their lives along the straight and narrow path. When deserving persons who have paid their debt to society are afforded a second chance, the entirety of Jamaica and her people, as Senator Tavares Finson said, will benefit. So, Mr. President, as I'm closing, I want to place on record again that this bill is the first of many reforms to come. It's an important step, but it will not be the last word. Our administration is committed to a steady program of modernization across the expungement system, and today is about meaningfully advancing that mission. Mr. President, I also always have to say that it reaffirms that rehabilitation is real. Our justice policies are real. Plan Secure Jamaica and its provisions are real. Our results are real. And Mr. President, as of January 24, 2026, the last data I had, major crimes are down 36.2%. Murders are down 54.2%. Murders are down. Mr. President, in mid-2025, a new memorandum of understanding was signed by the Ministry of National Security, the Department of Correctional Services, and the Hart NSTA Trust to equip inmates and wards of the state with the skills and training necessary to secure meaningful employment upon release. Our goal is that in 1 year of implementing this new MOU, we would have trained and certified at least 1,000 inmates and juvenile wards. That is our target for this year. So we will leave no well-thinking Jamaican behind as we march towards our days of peace, productivity, and prosperity. And earlier I echoed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s reminder that forgiveness is an expression of love. This theme of forgiveness is timeless, and nowhere is it better expressed than the word of the Almighty. Colleagues, as you contemplate the choice before you, it would do us well to remember Ephesians 4, verse 32. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. Mr. President, I follow Christ's example to forgive, and I thank my colleagues for supporting this bill of forgiveness. Mr. President, I therefore ask that the bill be read a second time.
Thank you very much, Minister. The question is that the bill be read a second time. Those in favor? Against? Mr. Clark?
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Act read a second time.
Thank you very much. The Senate will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate to consider the bill clause by clause. With the agreement of both leaders, I will take the clauses in a group, en bloc. Where you have? 3, okay. Pay attention, please. I put clauses 1 and 2. Those in favor? Against? I put clause 3.
Come on, people understand that. He's a man talk for the people understand.
Come now, Senator Brown. Clause 3. You have a...
We're proposing 3 and 3 that a C be added because I want to just explain why I want to add the C. A number of our people here have expressed concern that this appears to be discriminatory. So I'm proposing at C, 3C, a C, have to be a C to say that this section be reviewed within 12 months as to the constitutionality of what appear of it.
It's not an issue, you know, colleagues. The member has proposed an amendment. Okay? You have heard it? You have heard the amendment? Eh? Have you heard it? All in favor of the proposed amendment? Are those in favor? Against? Against? So the noes have it. So I put clause 3. I put clause 3. Those in favor? Against? I put clauses 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Those in favor? Against? I put clause 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay. I put clauses 9, 10, and 11. Those in favor? Against? I put clause 12. Senator Brown, clause 12.
You call it idleness? I'm proposing that an amendment be made to 12, that we include a D, which requires that the third schedule be reviewed within 3 years of the passage of this legislation.
Thank you very much. Members would have heard the proposed amendment. Those in favor? That's not the question I asked. I asked those in favor? Those against? You're not really calling. No, the noes have it. I'm not having the divide. Come, Senator Brown, man. I put clause 12. Those in favor? I put the title and enacting clause. Those in favor? Come to live it up now, please. Those in favor? The question is, The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Those in favor? You can go proceed. I do report the bill as having passed committee stage without amendment. Minister?
Mr. President, I ask that the bill be read a third time.
Thank you, Minister. Those in favor? Against? Mr. Clark?
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Act read a third time and passed.
Thank you very much. Leader Scott Motley and Dixon, we have some housekeeping to do. Yes, in relation to the Standing Orders Committee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President. I'm asking for a recommittal of notices of motions given orally.
Members should have heard. Those in favor?
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved that a comprehensive review of the standing orders of the Senate be undertaken, and be it resolved that the Standing Orders Committee of the Senate conduct said review and report its findings to this Honorable Senate. And be it further resolved that in conducting the review, the Standing Orders Committee adopt the work of the Standing Orders Committee of the previous Senate in respect of a similar resolution and take its findings into account in formulating its recommendations to this Honorable Senate. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which was given.
Thank you very much. So we return to public business. Minister?
Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which was given earlier.
Thank you very much. The question is that the standing orders be suspended to enable the minister to take the motion, notice of which was given earlier. Those in favor? Aye. Against?
Mr. President, there's no debate, and so I now ask that the motion, notice of which was given, be approved.
Thank you very much. Members would have heard the motion, the request. Those in favor? Against? And Minister, I think you're going to ask to return to notices of motions given earlier. The question is that the standing orders be suspended to allow us to deal with a matter at notices of motions given orally. I know, and recommit.
Okay. Yes.
Well, I'm using
Mr.
the word.
President, I'm asking for the recommittal of notices of motions given orally.
Thank you very much. Members would have heard the motion. Those in favor? Against?
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved with reference to the sessional select, joint select, and select committees which are appointed in the current session of Parliament, and where these committees have not completed their deliberations, that in the new session of Parliament, this Honourable Senate be empowered to enable those committees to proceed with the issues referred to them from the stage reached before prorogation. Be it further resolved that the composition of all these committees remain unchanged except where necessary by further motion taken and approved by this Honourable Senate. And be it further resolved with reference to the matters identified below, which are included in the order of business in this session of Parliament, but for which deliberations have not been completed, that in the new session of Parliament, the Senate be empowered to proceed with them from the stage reached before prorogation. And so, Mr. President, these are a bill entitled An Act to amend the Jamaica Promotions Corporation Act and to provide for connected matters. Secondly, a bill entitled An Act to amend the Financial Investigations Division Act. Thirdly, a bill entitled An Act to amend the Financial Administration and Audit Act. And the fourth one is private members' motions numbers 1 and 2. Mr. President, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take this motion.
Thank you very much, Minister, and we return to public business. Minister?
All right, Mr. President, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Members would have heard the question.
Are we to understand that this is the last sitting of this year? Because I would have expected that to have come next week if we're meeting next week. So I was trying to clarify whether or not that's the intention, so I can know that I should not ask for a delay. No, I don't want to hear him say, I want to hear you.
Yeah, Senator
because
Brown.
Your hypocrisy is so well known.
Senator Brown.
Yeah.
I'm of the view that this will be the last session. I'm of that view. Go ahead, Minister. The question is that the standing orders be suspended to enable the Minister to take the motion, notice of which was given earlier. Those in favor? Against? Minister?
Mr. President, I ask that the motion be approved.
The question is that the motion, notice of which was given earlier by the Minister, be approved. Those in favor? Against? Okay. I just asked the Senate to recognize the President of the... What? I just asked the members of the Senate to recognize the presence of the Honorable Speaker.
Royal in royal blue.
And she has just indicated that the members of the CPA present, the presenters, yeah, are having lunch downstairs, so she's suggesting that we join them, if you wish. Correct, Speaker? Thank you very much. Minister?
Mr. President, it is not contemplated that we'll do any further business today, and I therefore ask that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed.
Members should have heard the question. Those in favor? Against? This Honorable Senate now stands adjourned for a date to be fixed.